Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. 1 in 4 boys in America grow up without a father at home. Only a quarter of K through 12 teachers are male. So you have a significant percentage of boys who have no immediate male role model in their lives. For boys raised by single parents as compared to girls raised by single parents, boys are suspended at 25% higher rate than girls. And now we see the graduation rates for boys from high school, in addition to college, in free fall. Crisis? I think it would be described as a crisis if it was girls on the wrong side of those statistics. Increasingly, we're seeing columnists and educators taking notice of this and saying it's a problem. What's the future of what kind of future in America will so many men have if they're uneducated and undisciplined in so many respects? Well, this is something that our next guest, Dr. Leonard Sachs, was pointing out 15 years ago when he wrote the book Boys Adrift, the 5 factors driving the growing epidemic of unmotivated boys and underachieving young men. And now people like Tom Edsall in the New York Times, and there was a good op-ed in USA Today by a private school headmaster this week, private school headmaster in the Pittsburgh area this week, raising the specter of this as a significant national problem. We're pleased to be joined again by Dr. Leonard Sachs to discuss. Thanks for joining us, Dr. Sachs. Appreciate it.
Thanks for inviting me.
So in the 15 years since you wrote Boys Adrift, they've drifted farther out to sea, haven't they?
Yes, indeed. The first edition, I'm proud to say, was prophetic. When the Journal of the American Medical Association reviewed my book back in 2007, they said that the book was very persuasive, but they weren't totally persuaded that there was indeed a gap in achievement between girls and boys. 15 years ago when I wrote the book, the data were not as dramatic, but as you've just described, they're pretty dramatic now, and the evidence that was there 15 years ago, much more compelling and powerful evidence now of a growing gender gap in academic achievement across the board, affluent and low income, urban, suburban, and rural, white, black, and Latino. Boys across this country are doing less well, are less motivated compared to their sisters. And it's again, we've got very recent research showing that if these trends continue, within a few years, the ratio of college graduates at American universities will be 2 women graduating for every man.
Wow.
And this is happening not primarily because women are doing better. It's happening because boys are doing worse. And again, I defend that statement at length in the second edition of my book, Boys Adrift, where I kind of brought everything up to the modern era, because 15 years ago is prehistoric.
Well, what's the reason for it? I mean, what's put the catalyst behind this?
Yeah. So the subtitle of my book, as you know, is the 5 factors driving the growing epidemic of unmotivated boys and underachieving young men. But let's just talk about one, and that is video games. When I talk to parents over 35, they really don't get that. And I think it's parents over 35, when they think of video games, they're thinking of Pac-Man. They've never played Call of Duty, Grand Theft Auto, RDR2. They often don't even know what these games are, and they don't understand how good these games are, how compelling, how realistic they are. To win at RDR2, you're going to have to invest about 40 to 60 hours. And when you complete your mission and you win that game, it's a great sense of achievement. And a boy feels like he's really accomplished something. And Spanish grammar, the War of 1812, who cares? And that's true not only of that boy, it's true of his friends as well. So if you can boast to your friends about how you conquered RDR2, they're going to be impressed. If you got an A instead of B in Spanish, and you're an
not
American boy
celebrated.
today, you
Yeah.
probably don't even want your friends to know that.
Well, it's how they socialize too. I mean, especially during the pandemic. Are you kidding me? When some moms wouldn't let their kids out of the house, because they talk to each other and they play against each other. So it's a
Well, it's
whole different
become
level.
a world unto itself, and it's a real problem because it shifts motivation away from the real world to the video game world. And parents need to be in front of this, and parents need to limit and govern and guide how much time their kid is spending on video games and which video games they are playing.
So there was an interesting piece we talked about on the show last month that appeared in Yahoo Finance, detailing the 7 ways men live without working in America. Nearly 1/3 of all working age men, 16 to 64, which is 30 million men, do not effectively work. And, you know, some of them are understandable. Okay, it's a 2-parent family. The wife makes more money, so he's staying home and raising the kids. But others include the fact that 52% of young people aged 18 to 29 now live with one or both of their parents, which is an all-time high, and other things that are obviously less productive than staying home to raise your kids.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
So,
and it's a major focus of my book, Boys Adrift. There's a graph among able-bodied men, 25 to 54 years of age. That is the prime of their working years, 25 to 54 years of age, able-bodied, not disabled. How many are not working and not looking for work? Mm-hmm. And again, the unemployment numbers don't capture this because unemployment is a measure of people looking for work. A growing number of American men in the prime of their working years are not in the labor force. They're not working and they're not looking for work. That used to be a badge of shame. You know, a 30-year-old man who's able-bodied, living at home with his parents, 30 years ago, that was very rare, and that man would not be boasting about it. Today, as you've just noted, there's a growing number of young men in their late 20s and 30s who are not working, not looking for work, living in their parents' home, playing Call of Duty, Grand Theft Auto, and World of Warcraft, and boasting about how they get to level 85 in World of Warcraft, and they are guild master, and they're hanging out with literally thousands of other young men, and they don't see the problem. Their parents often are freaking out, and I hear from them. But these men are in a new culture where it's okay to be a slacker. It's cool to be a slacker.
Well, and so,
Big Lebowski.
So Doc, so who cares? Let women do it all. They want all these responsibilities. Let them do it all. And these slackers, if they're marginalized and relegated to playing video games, as long as the parents will tolerate them in their basements, then that's, you know, just less competition for men and women who are strivers. No big deal. What's the is there some societal impact that we're overlooking?
There's a big societal impact, and to put it bluntly, the societal impact is a collapse of the family. So it turns out that so I've had this argument with many critics, and they'll say, okay, so Dr. Sachs, you're all concerned about the fact that there's now 3 women for every 2 men graduating from American colleges. Well, in 1970, it was the other way around. There were 3 men for every 2 women graduating from American colleges. I don't see that anyone was really upset about that. So now the pendulum has swung the other way. Why should anybody care? And the answer I give, the answer that the researchers give about why we should care is 3 words: educational assortative mating. What that means, educational assortative mating, means that if a young woman's earned a college degree and she wants to get married, she's looking for a man who has equal or greater educational achievement. 50 years ago, that was not true. If a man graduated with a college degree and he was looking to marry a woman, he might have a lot of qualifications in mind, but educational attainment was not one of them. He was happy to marry his secretary. She was pretty. She didn't have to have a 4-year degree. But women looking to marry a man are looking for a man who is as accomplished and motivated as they are, or more so. And this is not just college-educated women. This is true across the board. So I'm a family doctor in my own practice. Young woman had 2 kids, unmarried, and I know her, I know the kids, and I know the father. And I said to her, I said, Linda, I bumped into Brett the other day, and he's going on and on about how great you are and how funny you are and how pretty you are. And he told me he's asked you to marry him twice. I said, Linda, how come you don't want to marry the father of your two kids? And she said, Dr. Sachs, I already have 2 babies at home. I don't need a third.
Oh.
Women are looking to marry men who are as motivated and accomplished as they are, and there are not enough good men to go around. And the result is a collapse in the rate of marriage across the United States over the last 30 years, and a dramatic rise in the proportion of young women who have children out of wedlock or are single moms. So another number, 30 years ago, what proportion of college-educated women had children out of wedlock? 4%. Latest figures, 26%. So we've seen more than a 6-fold increase in the proportion of young college-educated women having children without fathers in the home, without being married or cohabiting, because, as I said, there are not enough good men to go around. So this is a problem not just for men. This is a problem for the country. This is a problem for any woman who wants to have a good man in her home.
Well, and the other thing, too, we understand from the data is that these single men who are unmarriable, they're not just playing video games, they're engaged at heightened levels in all sorts of other unproductive activities that have societal costs like drug use and crime.
Well, sure. And Margaret Mead, the great anthropologist, once said the great challenge for any culture is what to do with your young men. Because if you don't harness that energy, bad things happen, violence and crime. I mean, most of the violent crime is committed by young men. And we're not doing a good job of harnessing our young men, of getting them motivated, engaged, working hard in the workplace. We're losing a growing number of young men.
I notice your Twitter handle is Unfragile Kids. Why?
Yes. So across the United States, we're finding a growing proportion of kids who are fragile. And this is true of both girls and boys. This girl might look like she's doing great, and she's got this great college application, and then a little thing happens, and she collapses, and she is suicidal because she got a B- on her physics exam. And you might laugh at that. Why would anyone be suicidal because she got a B- on her physics exam? But that happens. This girl has rolled up her whole self-concept in the idea of being the genius, of being the smartest. And when that bubble is punctured, there's nothing. She was all about performance, and it's gone. And the parents are concerned about their son because he's flunking out, but he couldn't care less. He's having a great time with his video games and his pornography. So the girls and the boys are both struggling, but they're struggling in very different ways.
And how much has this been exacerbated just from your personal experience as a practitioner during COVID?
So my personal experience was actually very much borne out by a study that Jean Twenge published recently. Jean Twenge, a very important scholar, who surveyed teenagers across the United States during lockdown. And she found what sociologists call bimodal. Bimodal means that kids are going in one of two ways. Some kids are doing worse as a result of the pandemic, but some kids are actually doing better. And she found there's one question you can ask an American teenager, and based on the answer to that question, you will know whether that kid is thriving or desperate during the pandemic. That one question is, as a result of the pandemic, have you become closer to your parents? As a result of the pandemic, have you become closer to your parents? Kids who say yes are thriving. Kids who say no are much more likely to be anxious and depressed. So when the pandemic, a year and a half ago, New York Times published articles saying, hey, don't worry about limits on screens. Let kids spend as much time as they want with their video games and their social media. Parents who follow that advice and let their kids just binge on social media and video games, those kids hold up in their bedrooms looking at a screen, those kids are doing much worse. but parents who didn't follow the advice of the New York Times and said, hey, we're at home together. Let's spend more time together. Let's play board games. Let's go for a walk. Let's spend time together as a family. Those kids are thriving. They're actually less likely to be anxious or depressed compared with 2 years ago.
Very interesting. Dr. Leonard Sachs, MD, PhD, author of Boys Adrift, The 5 Factors Driving the Growing Epidemic of Unmotivated Boys and Underachieving Young Men, now in its second edition. Dr. Sachs, thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks again for inviting me.
Thank you. You're the best. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
This is the morning show more Chicago radio listeners are choosing. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
This is Carol Platt-Liebau for townhall.com. Joe Biden's Department of Justice has released a memo announcing it would crack down on parents at school board meetings because some board members feel threatened by parents objecting to everything from critical race theory to mask mandates. But there are serious